Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Return to Campus student webinar. It is great to see so many of you joining us today. My name is Samantha Reed, and I am the Executive Director, Office of the Vice President Students, and I am your co-moderator, along with my colleague, David Shorthouse, Executive Director, Academic Initiatives, Office of the Provost and Vice President Academic, and we are delighted to be hosting this event today. I would like to begin with a land acknowledgement. I am joining you today from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. UBC's campuses at Point Grey and Robson Square are located on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. And UBC Okanagan is situated in the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan Nation. As a settler in this territory, I am grateful to be able to live here and the opportunity to enjoy the many wonders of BC. And I am so grateful for the Indigenous caretakers of these beautiful lands. By acknowledging the traditional owners of these lands, I'm reminding myself and ourselves of Canada's long-standing colonial structures and systems that I continue to uphold myself to learning, and I'm committed to truth and reconciliation. I have been heartbroken to learn, and I'm continuing to grapple, as many of you and our community are, with the recent discoveries of the bodies of children on the grounds of the former residential schools in Kamloops, BC, Brandon, Manitoba, and in Saskatchewan. Mine and UBC's heart is with all of our Indigenous students, colleagues, the communities, the residential school survivors, and their families. I would also like to acknowledge that you are all joining us virtually today from many places, near and far, and take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of those lands. We are excited and delighted to have you joining us today. As you all are aware, over the past several months, the university has been working in close partnership with and under the guidance from the Provincial Health Office, our regional health authorities, and the Ministry of Advanced Education and Skills Training. We are excited to welcome you back at the start of the academic term, bringing much vibrancy back to our campus. We realize and acknowledge that it is natural for you to feel anxious about returning to campus or have concerns about your and your fellow students' health and well-being. And we are committed to the health and well-being of our community, and we're being thoughtful and taking a gradual transition approach to support all of you and our community in our return to campus. We recognize that many of you have many questions and concerns about the return to campus, including questions about classrooms, social activities, access to programs and services, just to name a few. And through today's Return to Campus webinar, we will be sharing these details with you and answering your questions. Specifically, you will be learning about our return to campus plans for September, how UBC is planning for the health, well-being, and safety of our community, what you can expect from the student experience, the in-person learning approach for winter term 1, and student supports and services that will be available to you. We have structured today's webinar to allow us the opportunity to share these details with you, as well as for you to ask your questions. Specifically, we will kick off with first hearing from both Dr. Ainsley Carey, Vice President Students, and Dr. Andrew Siri, Provost and Vice President Academic. That will then be followed by presentations from 5 panelists who will provide key information about winter term 1 and our return to campus. This will then be followed by a Q&A where our speakers, along with additional representatives from the Vice President Students portfolio and the Provost and Vice President Academic portfolio, as well as the AMS and GSS presidents, will answer your questions, and we both received in advance from you, as well as during this session, you will have an opportunity to submit your questions. Before we start, there are just a few housekeeping items I would like to acknowledge first. We ask that everyone participating in this webinar help to contribute to creating a respectful environment for you and your fellow participants and speakers. The UBC Respectful Environment Statement provides the guiding principles to support us in building an environment in which respect, civility, diversity, opportunity, and inclusion are values, and we have posted a link in the chat for your reference. This event is being recorded and will be available for viewing starting tomorrow, and we have noted the link in the chat where the recording will be posted for your reference. In addition, please continue to refer to the variety of different sources available for regular updates and FAQs. These include the COVID-19.ubc.ca site, the students.ubc.ca /campus-life/returning-to-campus, as well as grad.ubc.ca /COVID-19. These have also been posted in the chat for your reference. This event is live captioned. You can turn the captions on or off at the bottom of your screen by clicking the live caption button. If during the webinar you have any technical difficulties, you can contact IT Help Desk at av.helpdesk@ubc.ca, and this has also been noted in the chat. I will now turn it over to my co-moderator, Dave Shorthouse, to introduce our speakers and panelists. Dave, over to you.
Thank you, Samantha, and good morning, everyone. It's so wonderful to have you join us today, and I can't tell you how thrilled I am to be part of today's information session and question and answer period. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our host for today. Starting off will be Dr. Andrew Zeri. Dr. Zeri is our Provost and Vice President Academic. Dr. Zeri joined UBC in 2017 from the University of California, Berkeley, where he served as Vice Provost for Strategic Academic and Facilities Planning. Andrew holds an academic appointment in Mechanical Engineering in our Faculty of Applied Science. Following Andrew will be Dr. Ainsley Carey, our Vice President Students. Dr. Carey joined UBC from the University of Southern California in 2019, where he served as Vice President Student Affairs. Dr. Carey holds an academic appointment in our Faculty of Education. Thank you very much, and over to you, Dr. Zeri.
Thank you, Dave. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this student town hall. As Dave mentioned, my name is Andrew Zeri. I am the Provost and Vice President Academic for UBC Vancouver. My office provides leadership for UBC academic strategy, budget, and planning. We oversee UBC's academic programs and support functions like the library, faculty affairs, enrollment, sustainability, and information technology. I work closely with the deans of UBC Vancouver to make sure the academic experience of our students is of high quality. I will focus my remarks now on the academic aspects of the return to campus. We are very excited to welcome you back to campus. Our main goal is the health and safety of students, faculty, and staff. Many members of our community have experienced stress and worry. Some have been troubled by being socially isolated. Many are concerned about the health of their family members and about their own health. Many are separated from loved ones or experiencing a sense of helplessness. And many have experienced the loss of someone they know to COVID-19, like I have. I know it has been very isolating and lonely to engage in remote instruction in a way that you did not plan. I know many of you miss seeing other students and instructors in person and miss enjoying all the benefits of our beautiful campus. These worries and concerns are important to us, but the good news is that we have the assurance by public health officials that universities in British Columbia can return safely to mostly in-person engagement. We are therefore very much looking forward to seeing you this fall. I want to be sure you know that safety measures on campus, based on the science from public health, have been working very well for the last 16 months. Many staff and faculty have been working on campus diligently throughout the pandemic on key aspects of UBC teaching and learning, research, and operations. We have housed thousands of students in residences and conducted hundreds of courses face-to-face on campus, all without significant incident during the worst parts of the pandemic in Canada. Now, of course, thanks to the development and broad adoption of vaccines, the pandemic in Canada is entering a much less concerning phase, even as the pandemic remains a very serious issue in many parts of the world. The most important thing you can do to protect yourself and your community is to become fully vaccinated when the opportunity is available to you. I will repeat that, it's so important. The most important thing that you can do to protect yourself and your community is to become fully vaccinated. I've done it, and it felt good to do my part. I have been working closely with the faculties and our own community experts on the planning for increased in-person teaching and learning for September. In addition to ensuring safety, we have made significant investments in areas that will further improve your academic experience. We have improved many classrooms to allow instructors to record and/or live stream lectures. We have provided additional funding for teaching assistants to support you and your instructors. We are working to increase our Wi-Fi capacity and density on campus, so you will have strong internet connectivity for online activities and courses. On top of this, UBC has carefully examined and improved the ventilation systems for all of our teaching spaces on campus. This will ensure a high standard of safety for the UBC community. I am proud of the way our faculties and our faculty members have focused their efforts on ensuring the quality of the academic experience you have at UBC. We managed a difficult transition to remote teaching and learning early in the pandemic when we had to. And now I am delighted that we are managing a transition back to primarily in-person teaching and learning on campus. Thank you, and I believe I now pass it over to Dr. Carey.
Andrew, thank you so much for those opening comments. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are joining us in the world. I understand more than 1,500 students have registered for today's session. I could imagine those students are coming from every province in Canada and many places around the world. So thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to listen in today. I know this has been a difficult year for you. I would like to echo the comments of my colleague, Andrew here. This has not been what you've expected for your first or second year of enrollment, maybe even your junior or senior year. And I am seeing this through the lens of my own daughter, who is in high school right now and having a very different academic experience. So I understand the challenges that you face. I understand the loneliness, the depression, the anxiety that you might be experiencing as a result of our current mode of delivery of education all over the world. So we are here with you in understanding this struggle, this pain, and we're hoping and looking forward to moving forward. I am excited about returning to campus, to see students, faculty, staff back on campus. Our public health partners that Andrew has mentioned, Bonnie Henry, Rika Gustafson, Michael Schwantz, they have been working with us on this pandemic from day one. From the very beginning, they have lent their expert advice to guide us through this to this point very safely, and we're almost there. They assure us that here in Canada, we will be able to return to some semblance of normalcy with regard to our academic functioning and our student affairs mission. That experience outside the classroom, we will be able to deliver many of those things as we have in the past. As more people get vaccinated, we will be able to return to normalcy. Third, I want to take this opportunity to share with you something that does concern me. Prior to the pandemic, the world was experiencing a high degree of awareness around issues of racial tension and social justice. Anti-Asian, anti-Indigenous, and anti-Black racism was on a rise. And the pandemic only heightened our awareness of these existing cultural tensions that had existed for decades, if not centuries. People with the intent to do harm used the pandemic to inflict harm. People also used the pandemic to be offensive and disrespectful. UBC lives and operates by a respectful environment, a respectful workplace and learning environment. I'll read a section of that statement. The best possible environment for working, learning, and living is one in which respect, civility, diversity, opportunity, and inclusion are valued. Everyone at the University of British Columbia is expected to conduct themselves in a manner that upholds these principles in all communications and interactions with fellow UBC community members and the public in all university-related settings. This statement is so important to our academic and student life mission. This year, more than ever, we will be focusing on this as we return to a respectful workplace environment. The pandemic is not an excuse for us to treat each other differently. We will uphold these values. As we return to campus, students can expect student health and well-being services will be fully open and accessible, both in person and virtual. I'm excited that our lead student health officer joins us today, and she'll talk more about what's happening in our student health enterprises. But we learned so much from the pandemic about accessibility that we hope to continue to move those messages forward with regard to virtual and hybrid services. Our Center for Accessibility and Disability Resource Center at the Okanagan has been working overtime to make sure that we can be prepared to support students in this kind of return to learning world that we will experience with new virtual ways of delivering education, but also students needing more flexibility in their educational opportunities. We are aware that career services remains important to students as they prepare to enter the workforce. Some students may be joining us in their junior or senior year after completing a year plus in a virtual environment, and you are thinking about the next set of career opportunities. Well, we have been thinking about your career opportunities, and how do we prepare you for this post-pandemic world? How do we prepare you to interview in this new work environment? Well, we have been equipping our Career Center to do just that. New students, and those of you who haven't had a chance to have a first year on campus, our second year students, we will have new student orientation. We will have Jumpstart and Imagine Day, and we'll offer them in a hybrid model. Hybrid meaning parts of it will be virtual and parts of it will be on ground, as well as completely virtual options for students to learn about the university and engage in the orientation experience. Our student housing and dining will be open. A few smaller dining venues will be closed because we cannot provide some of the social distancing that we would like to in our dining facilities, but many of our dining facilities will be wide open to all students. All of our residence halls facilities will be open for students. We are also assisting students who are coming from countries and they may need self-isolation or quarantining space. We will work with each individual student to make sure that you have accommodations. We're even prepared to support some students financially as you seek accommodations if you need to self-isolate or quarantine upon arrival. Our Office of International Student Services and Student Housing are working together to provide that support. With regard to recreation and sports activities, all of our recreation and UBC sports facilities will be open and accessible, in some cases with limited space in an effort to provide for social distancing where needed. And many of our sports teams will be getting back to action in the fall. Those are still being determined by those leagues that are involved. But we are a couple months away from getting ready for the fall, and some of this information may change and be updated as time proceeds, but we are excited about having you back. I want to thank you again for your time and attention today, for being here. I want to repeat my acknowledgement about how difficult this is. I know this has been a difficult year. Some of you have thrived in this year. For many students, it's been a really tough year. I also want to repeat that UBC prioritizes a respectful environment for living and working, and we don't tolerate anything less. So I hope you are looking forward to joining us and being a part of our community. That concludes my comments. Thank you. Sam, I'm returning it back to you.
Thank you. Dave, it's actually Dave.
Hi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Carey, for those wonderful remarks. It now gives me great pleasure to turn the microphone over to Norajeen Hassan. Excuse me. Norajeen is a recent arrival at UBC in the Vice President's Students Office and is responsible for student health and well-being. Over to you, Norajeen.
Hello. Thank you, Ainsley and David. Good morning. My name is Nurjeen Hassam, and I'm so happy to be here today in a role that, as David mentioned, is new to UBC. I have come from working as the Chief Operating Officer at the BC Centre for Disease Control to a new role as Chief Student Health Officer for UBC. In this role, I am accountable for all the student health services and for bringing a public health perspective to student health. This is what I would like to do today, to share with you the public health thinking that is informing the decision to return to campus. Before I start, I gratefully acknowledge that I am speaking today from Coast Salish territory, a land of many nations, and I am a settler in this territory committed to both truth and reconciliation and to anti-racism more broadly. I would also like to thank all the folks at UBC and BCCDC who have contributed to this presentation. Next slide, please. UBC has made its decision about returning to campus with the help and under the guidance of a number of people, principles, and policies. As you can imagine, UBC does not work alone. Next slide. And as Ainsley Carey mentioned, there are a number of partners involved in these decisions, including the BC Centre for Disease Control, Public Health, the Ministry of Advanced Education and Skills Development, and others. Next slide. And a number of key documents that are guiding this work. Next slide. And importantly, I want you all to know that there are strong public health principles that are used for making decisions. Next slide. Together, these partners, principles, and guidance inform UBC's response. And from the beginning of this pandemic, UBC has been responsive and acted in the best interests of students, staff, and faculty. Next slide. Let's take a moment to understand the difference in the COVID situation then and now. Next slide. When COVID emerged in the human population, public health around the world responded and soon declared it a pandemic. At that time, COVID was a new pathogen. We knew that it was transmissible from person to person and that it could cause serious illness in a proportion of people. Most importantly, we knew that an entire or substantial proportion of the population were susceptible to the infection. Next slide. In the midst of all this, UBC responded quickly by going online and adapting to the global pandemic and public health guidance. All of you responded as well. All of our lives adapted to the pandemic. This slide didn't adapt to the pandemic clearly. Next slide, please. So what's changed now? A lot, actually. Since 2019, there have been a number of critical developments about COVID. We know much more about the pathogen. An estimated 19,000 scientific publications were released from December 2019 to June 2020 around COVID. It is also estimated that the number of journal articles has been doubling every 20 days since January 2020. Secondly, we have a lab test that is highly effective at detecting COVID and that we use to target our interventions. This was a major development. And lastly, we have a safe, effective, and available vaccines, in fact. Next slide. With these developments, we are eliminating one of the key conditions of the pandemic. No longer is the entire or substantial proportion of the population susceptible to the infection. Now, I recognize this is different across the world. In some parts of the world, they are still deep in the throes of the pandemic. In BC, we are fortunate that we have been able to move in this direction. This graph is a BC graph, and it shows that early on, our targeted vaccines were effective in saving the lives of those most susceptible. And when the vaccines were broadly available, we see a sharp decline in cases and hospitalizations, unlike any previous decline. Next slide. Vaccines have made an impact at the individual level by substantially reducing the risk of infection, serious illness, and death. And here in Canada, where we are fortunate to have been able to manage the pandemic to the extent that we have a significant decrease in cases and hospitalizations, we are in a position now that public health will soon be able to make a shift from managing COVID-19 as an emergency to managing it as a communicable disease. Next slide. So here in BC, when it is time for that shift, public health will be here to do that. Public health routinely monitors and manages a number of communicable diseases that we don't think about much anymore. Measles, mumps, rubella, polio, we don't think about those as much because public health manages those as communicable diseases. They're very good at that, and we are in good hands with them. Public health will use some of the same tools that you are familiar with that they have been using for COVID, surveillance and monitoring, testing, and some of the others listed, but they will shift the way they use them, and they will adjust to the needs of our situation. Next slide. Dr. Reka Gustafson, the Deputy Provincial Health Officer, has said that she can see a time when this shift will happen, and that for COVID, we will monitor it, protect against local resurgences, and respond to those. The vaccines too may change. There may be booster or an annual dose. These are all things that are being studied. Next slide. And just like public health is preparing to shift the way they manage COVID, we too at UBC need to shift how we are preparing for September. While we are still in a pandemic and have to continue following the current guidelines, these guidelines will change when the vaccination rates increase and case and hospitalization rates decrease. At that point, we too will be able to shift our behaviors and be less restrictive. Next slide. In order to prepare for in-person classes and events, faculty, staff, and students are encouraged to get vaccinated if they can, but it will not be a requirement. Generally, public health does not require vaccines because there are all sorts of reasons that people can or will not get them. The more important thing is to make them available, safe and effective, and to educate people about the value of vaccines. Also, if you need any of the current UBC student health services, these will be available to you in person in September, and many of them will continue to be available virtually as well. We will try to meet your preference when you call to make an appointment for a service of in-person or virtual. The online navigation tool shown here is the best place to go to find the range of services that are available to you for your mental health, your physical health, and for wellness support. I really encourage you to browse through this site and the links before you need help so you know what's available to you. Thank you for your time. And I will now hand it over to Dr. Pam Ratner, Vice Provost and Associate Vice President, Faculty Planning.
Thank you, Norjean, and welcome everyone. I too want to acknowledge that this has been a very challenging and somewhat distressing time for most, if not all of us. And so I'm very pleased that you're able to join us. Next slide, please. You've seen this graph, but I want to emphasize it. We acknowledge that the pandemic is a very serious concern in many parts of the world. In British Columbia, as Dr. Sari stated, we've been very fortunate to have had a very good response to the public health management of the pandemic, that management that Norjean just described. Today, with a population of just under 4.7 million people in this province, we're averaging about 75 new cases a day. And you can see that that count is continuing to decline precipitously with the introduction of vaccines. 70% of adults in BC have had one dose of vaccine. More are being vaccinated, and all eligible people will have their second doses over the summer months. These vaccines are proving very effective. And so we are confident that we can have a relatively normal and safe academic term this fall. And that's why we're encouraging you to get vaccinated. And you're going to hear that over and over again. Go and get vaccinated now or soon after you arrive in Canada. International students are eligible, and there's support here to help you learn how to become registered and access a vaccine. May I have the next slide, please? I know people have wondered about study space on campus. I want to assure you that study spaces and informal learning areas will be open. Our building operations teams will clean these spaces and our classrooms daily. We have planned to use almost all of our classrooms, and we will fill them to the capacity that's been recommended by our public health experts. We have done some statistical analysis about classroom use, and we've learned that if you return to the same seat or seat somewhere near that seat every time you enter the classroom, you reduce the number of unique contacts that you have very effectively. So we're encouraging you to think about taking the same seat or a seat very nearby every class. Next slide, please. Now, what can you do? Well, we're asking you that you not come to campus if you have any symptoms that are suggestive of COVID-19, or for that matter, any respiratory illness, a common cold, a flu. You should monitor yourself every day, and we have apps to help you take a look at what the symptoms are and ask yourself, do I have one of these? I should stay home, and this is what I need to do next. Wearing masks will possibly be a personal choice by September. We ask that you respect the up-to-date orders and recommendations of our local public health experts, and we will keep you informed about what those are. You should practice respiratory etiquette. That means when you cough or sneeze, use a tissue or sneeze into your sleeve. Wash your hands regularly with soap and warm water for at least 20 seconds. The advice here has been to sing happy birthday to yourself twice as you wash your hands. You're going to find hand sanitizer stations at the entrance to all of our buildings, but carrying your own is probably a very good idea. Next slide, please. I want to acknowledge that many of you have faced challenging financial circumstances. You've had reduced opportunity for employment. Perhaps your parents have had challenges with employment. Those of you who have applied for Canada student loans and grants, or those who are from BC and have applied to Student Aid BC, are also eligible for UBC bursaries if your financial situation requires additional support. And information about that is available on the Student Services websites. These bursaries are available to Canadian citizens, permanent residents, or those of you who have refugee status. If you need to get equipment to support online learning, such as headphones or webcams, we also have a Vancouver campus technology bursary, and that too has information available about it on the Student Services website. We want to be sure that you have the resources you need so that you could focus on your studies. If you find that you're facing unexpected financial distress sometime through the term, or you've had a significant change in your financial situation, you should contact your enrollment services advisor. Everyone has one assigned to them, and they can help you navigate your changes, connect you to relevant support, and you can contact enrollment services advisors directly. Log into Student Services Center and select UBC Contacts under Personal Info. That's on your Student Services Center. And I just had a text messages. This is up-to-date information from our registrar saying that bursaries are also available for all students getting loans from any province in Canada. I hope I didn't mislead you on that front. Next slide, please. UBC, I find a really inspiring place, both inside and outside the classroom. And this academic year, like all academic years, we intend to provide a broad range of educational, recreational, social, and cultural activities. There will be plenty of opportunity for you to do what you love or to master something new. From athletics to arts and culture, life on campus invigorates our minds and our bodies, something I think we all need about now. So thank you for joining us today. We're here to answer your questions, and I'm very pleased to now turn over the microphone to Dr. Simon Bates, Associate Provost, Teaching and Learning. Simon, over to you.
Thank you, Pam. Actually, I think it's Bruce Anderson next, and then I follow Bruce.
Yes, thanks, Simon.
My apologies.
No problem. Thanks very much, Pam, and thank you all very much for inviting me here. It's actually great going as one of the last people to speak, because everybody's already talked about most of what I want to present. And as Pam mentioned, and others have already mentioned, vaccination is one of the key messages. As my slide says, I'm the Director of Health and Safety. I've been with UBC for a number of years, and I have been promoting hand washing since the early 90s. Believe me, one of the best ways to protect yourself from any communicable disease is multiple hand washing. And if others haven't said it already, if you can count the number of times you've washed your hands in a day, then you haven't washed them enough. So please wash your hands as often as possible. Can I have the next slide, please? So as you can imagine, we at the university have been working with many partners in the province of BC for many months. This return to campus for planning for September 2021 started well before March this year, when we received a letter from Dr. Bonnie Henry to all the presidents of all the post-secondary institutions, basically informing us that we should start planning, robust planning for greater return to campus and 100% learning activities come the fall. We have been working with the Ministry of Advanced Education and the Provincial Health Office since the beginning of this pandemic, and have been developing plans over the past 14 months, not only to allow us to continue to work and learn during the pandemic, but also plan for this restart and this return to campus come September. We've already talked a lot about what we know about the virus and what we believe will be the case come September, and that's one of the things that we all have to try and get around in our heads is we are planning for a couple months from now. We are planning for an environment that will be significantly different from what it is right now. And what we have right now is significantly different from what we had 2 months ago. And so if we continue on these trends, we will be in a very good place here in BC and at all our campuses and all the post-secondary institutions within BC come September. The main thing is around the importance of getting vaccinated, and as Pam and others have said, we are working with our health authorities to have those available as much as possible come September. Can I have the next slide, please? So this is what we can expect. These are the assumptions we're making for September. As far as physical distancing, it will not be required in classrooms, and it will not be required in our work areas. This will allow us to return to 100% activities come September. The use of non-medical masks, as we have been throughout the pandemic, we are taking our guidance and information from our provincial health officer and our post-secondary institutions sector return to campus guidelines. And so the way it is looking right now, the role for non-medical masks come September will be a personal choice. So that means many will probably continue to wear non-medical masks, and we would like everybody to respect the decisions of those who choose to or choose not to come September. We are following the BC's restart plan, and that was presented earlier. There's a 4-step plan. Currently, we are in step 2 of that plan, and it is projected that we should go into step 3 as early as July 1st. What I'm hearing lately from the ministry and the provincial health office is that will most likely be pushed probably to July 5th or 6th for the start of step 3. And our plans that are been developed for a safe return to campus or greater return to campus, because there's many that have been here all along, is based on this step, as well as using step 3 as a transition period for us to go and have greater and greater activity, in-person activity here on campus, and reach step 4. And the indications we're getting and the work we're doing with the PHO and the ministry is that come step 4, the plans that are in place during this transition period will change again, and we'll most likely have something called a communicable disease plan for step 4 and moving forward. For anybody interested in our plans, we have gone from probably 500 to 600 COVID-19 safety plans over the past 14 months. We now have in place for step 3, or starting in step 3, we have 7 plans that will be rolled out. Those plans are currently available on the Safety and Risk Services website. So if you go to, I don't even know the name of our own website anymore, srs.ubc.ca or safety and risk services.ubc.ca, you can get those access to those plans, or you can download the UBC Safe Vancouver app, which also has the plans uploaded to that particular application. We within the app, we also have a number of other features, the ability to do your daily self health assessment, as well as reporting any incident or accident that may occur here on campus. For both campuses, there's a UBC Safe Okanagan app as well. So you can anticipate a role for non-medical masks for step 3 as well as step 4. But as I said, we will continue to follow the guidance by the provincial health officer. So come September, we can expect our occupancy numbers returning to pre-pandemic levels. Next slide, please. These are some examples of our safety plans that have been developed and that are up on the website. They're divided into what we call controlled spaces and uncontrolled spaces, or structured or unstructured spaces. Controlled and structured spaces are those where we know who is supposed to be in those particular areas. So for learning spaces, classroom teaching laboratories, for example, we have class lists. We know who is supposed to be in that particular classroom at that particular time. So if there were to happen to be a positive or an individual that tests positive for COVID-19 or any other type of communicable disease, we can do some contact tracing within that specific room or in that specific classroom, and then develop our mitigation strategies specific for that scenario, as compared to doing a broad brush approach to putting mitigation or restrictions across the entire campus or across an entire building, for example. So in our controlled spaces, we are able to target our safety protocols for those areas. So there will be a role for non-medical masks come step 4, most likely personal choice. There will continue to be the requirement to do your daily health assessment. You can use the safety app for that. And you will be encouraged to as others have already said, sit in the same area to help us with our contact tracing. So these are some examples of the plans that you may be needing. If I can go to the next slide, please. Some other controlled spaces are within our student residences, and there's a specific plan associated with that and what the expectations of behaviors are for our students living in residences. And then if we go to the next slide, we have examples of our uncontrolled spaces, spaces where we may not know who is supposed to be there. And there may be more of a role for non-medical masks in these, and there'll be maybe more signage and information around avoiding extended contact with face-to-face contact with others if you're not wearing a non-medical mask, and prolonged meaning more than 10 to 15 minutes. Next slide, please. As others have said, we all have a part to play, and this is your part. Get vaccinated if possible. Stay home if you're feeling unwell. Treat others with respect. As I've mentioned, wash your hands regularly, do your daily health assessment, and as Pam mentioned, practice good respiratory etiquette. There are campus rules, again, on our website. Follow those campus rules, and when required, wear a non-medical mask. I don't have this in my presentation, but I will let everybody know there is a lot of work. There's some questions in the background going on about ventilation and what's going on in our buildings. And there's a lot of work that has been going on for the past probably 3 years at UBC Vancouver around upgrading our ventilation systems. And that continues to go on, but we are in full compliance with all BC building code as well as all current information around protection for COVID-19 and the filtration that's required for that. So that has been happening and will continue to happen here on Vancouver campus and is already in place at the Okanagan campus. I believe that's my presentation. So now I would like to pass this over to Dr. Simon Bates, who's the Associate Provost for Teaching and Learning. Over to you, Simon.
Thank you, Bruce. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're hanging in there with the presentation carousel. Mine is the penultimate one, and then we'll get an opportunity to take some of your questions. So my pleasure to be able to make some comments about teaching and learning for the upcoming fall semester. I'm going to start with the course schedule. And as you all doubtless know, the registration period for that schedule is upon us. There are approximately 800 course sections that have a fully online pathway. In other words, in-person attendance is not required for those class sections. And that's a 5 or 6-fold increase from the number of online sections that we had pre-pandemic. It's about 8.5% of all the sections offered on the Vancouver campus in the upcoming fall semester. But it's somewhat uneven by faculties. In some faculties, there are 20% or more of sections that will be offered fully online. And in others, there are a few, if any. And you may be wondering, well, why that diversity? Ultimately, the choice about the nature of the instruction in a program and the courses within the program are not mandated by the administration of the university. These decisions sit with the academic departments and the faculty members who teach those courses and develop and deliver them. So that's a snapshot of online courses. I'll speak in a moment about some additional flexibility and support for students who may not be able to attend in person for parts of the upcoming semester. But just returning to registration, one of the questions that was submitted in advance, and actually I saw it again this morning in the chat, was, what if I think there's a good chance I'll be in that situation of not being on campus for the start of semester? What options do I have then? And a similar question, what happens if I can't register for online sections or can't find online options? And we know there's a whole variety of reasons why this might be the case. We can be cautiously optimistic about the trajectory of things in BC, as you've already heard. But the advice here really is to talk to your advising office. They will endeavor to support you in the best way possible. I can say that courses are leaving some spare capacity in sections that are scheduled online for students who do find themselves in this position. And similarly, the advice is the same if you find there aren't online options for courses you wish to register for. Talk to your advising offices, because some courses are making provision to record or stream classes. So I'll turn now to supporting students during the fall semester and speak a little bit more about this recording and streaming. We also expect that in addition to some students who may not be able to attend at the beginning of the semester, there may be times during the semester when students may not be able to come to class. We certainly hope that that's not going to be any resurgence of COVID issues, but it could be from seasonal respiratory ailments, as you've already heard. I think one of the things we all need to be much more diligent about is not feeling like we have to turn up to class, students or faculty, when it's clear that we're not feeling well. So we're supporting faculty as they plan for this, as they build courses for the fall. And some of that gets right into the design of courses. For example, encouraging faculty to be a little bit more flexible about participation requirements in classes. So if students do have to miss a period of class time, they don't necessarily feel that their participation grade is going to suffer. Other areas that we've been working on is, you heard it earlier, upgrading and expanding general teaching space classrooms for lecture capture and or streaming. So more than 70% of the general teaching spaces on the Vancouver campus will be equipped for capture. There are mobile carts for rooms that aren't equipped in this way. And we know faculties are also looking into this for their restricted teaching spaces within their own departments. We also know that some faculty will just want to DIY this. So we're developing resources to enable them to do that, whether it's recording Zoom or other streaming technologies. So we're really encouraging faculty to think about this flexibility, as it provides a path to learning continuity for students in some of the circumstances that they may find themselves in. And we certainly know that classroom recording is a valuable component of flexibility within a course for students. It provides the opportunity to review materials after the class or for revision purposes. It can also provide greater accessibility of learning materials in a course through closed captioning options like that's available through this webinar. But ultimately, whether and how a class is captured is a matter of instructor choice. Instructors may have valid reasons for not wanting to record lectures or other classroom sessions that could be around the design of the classes, the discussion topics that take place within the classes, and many other reasons as well. We're continuing to provide faculties with additional support and funding to continue the resources that they've been able to hire all through the pandemic, additional teaching assistants, additional graduate academic assistants, and so on. So that continues throughout the fall semester. I just make one final comment around examinations in online courses, because this was a particular question that cropped up. I mentioned earlier that around 8% or so of all courses will be offered fully online. The final assessment methods for these courses will vary. Some of these courses will not have final exams at all. Others will have only online examinations. Some will have in-person final exams for students who are able to take those assessments in person. And there'll be the option for students who are remote to either take the exam online or defer the examination until January, for example. So I'll finish my comments there in the interest of time and hand off to my colleague, Susan Porter, Vice Provost and Dean of Graduate Studies, for the final presentation segment.
Thanks very much, Simon. And I apologize for the wind blowing across my face. It's a very hot room I'm in. Welcome to everyone, and especially welcome to the graduate students that are here and or those that are entering grad school. I don't have actually too much more to say. I think everything that's been relevant generally is also relevant for graduate students. Maybe just a few points. An overarching advice that I will give is, if you're in doubt about anything in particular, I would encourage you to talk to your program about those questions, because there will be some variability across the university on ways that they are managing the fall. So courses, as Dr. Bates mentioned, most are face-to-face, but most programs, I would say, are quite cognizant that there will be situations that students can't attend, and those are going to be mostly international students possibly that aren't able to make it. And I know that many are looking at temporary options to accommodate that. So again, speak to your program about that. In terms of those who are doing research in their programs, there was an earlier question, pre-question about labs, and we fully anticipate, well, as Ms. Anderson mentioned, the labs will be at full capacity at step 3, and certainly that is our understanding for step 4, unless anything changes. And of course, there will be, as he mentioned, general guidelines around communicable diseases. So they should be at full capacity. In terms of research travel, that is a situation that's in flux, particularly outside of Canada. And there are a number of approval processes that may be necessary. So in these cases, again, consult with your faculty supervisor Depending on where you're going, you might need authorization from the Student Safety Abroad Office, although we always encourage to consult, and you have to register with them in any case. You might need approval processes by your faculty, and you might need a special approval processes from the ethics board. So it's going to be dependent on where you're going and what you're going for. In terms of our office, the professional development opportunities that we provide there will still definitely be online workshops and opportunities, but we're also going more back to some face-to-face and possibly some hybrid. So there will still be those options. And I did have one question about doctoral exams. These have been online for the pandemic. We're in the process of looking at how we'll operate these long-term, but almost certainly there will be continue to be an option for online if that's needed and desired, as well as face-to-face, and probably some versions of hybrid. And happy to answer any questions, but that's it for me. Thanks very much. Over to you, Samantha or Dave.
Thank you very much, Dr. Porter, and thank you all panelists for your great presentations. We have some amazing questions coming in to us through the live chat, as well as the questions that were pre-submitted. And I'm going to bundle a couple of questions because there's such great synergy between the two vehicles by which people have submitted questions. And I'm going to call on Bruce Anderson and possibly Norjean to talk about masking and vaccinations, and somewhat related here. So the question really around masks and vaccinations is, are they mandatory? And so we've touched a little bit around the encouragement to wear masks and so on, Bruce. But if we think about mandatory vaccinations in the residence context, it'd be great if you could speak to that.
I'll let Norjean talk about the mandatory vaccination bit. As far as masks, like I said, we've always followed the provincial health officer's guidance and regulations and restrictions, and I think the university has managed very well because of following that. And we've been able to keep our student residences open over the past 14 to 16 months. We've been able to maintain a lot of research activities as well as operational activities here on our campuses. Because of following those guidances. So we'll continue to follow that guidance. And the information that I have from the ministry as well as the PHO is that the use of masks will be a personal choice. So that's not to say that people won't be wearing them. It's just saying that we won't be making them mandatory for doing any in-person activities.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. Norjean, any comments on vaccinations being mandatory and so on in residence?
Yeah, I mean, as Bruce had mentioned, we're predicting the future here because we're talking about plans in September. But generally, in any organization or in public health, we do not make vaccines a requirement. There are very legitimate reasons why people cannot get vaccinated, and we do need to respect those reasons. Also, administratively, it is very difficult to manage staying on top of who has been and who has not been vaccinated at a given point, and especially with a vaccine like this that's available all over the world. It doesn't, ultimately, public health knows that when you mandate a vaccine to be a requirement, you don't get a better rate of vaccination than when you provide people with good information about what that vaccine is, how safe it is, and how effective it is. We will get as good numbers that way as we would with mandating. So our plan is to provide education and information and make the vaccines as available to people as possible. But no, at this point, I don't have any reason to believe that there'll be a requirement.
Thank you very much, Norjean. Norjean, another question that has come up again related to vaccinations, which I think is a very interesting one, is the question about students who receive their first dose of vaccinations once they arrive in Canada. What guidelines will they need to follow during the 8-week interval until they get their second dose?
So again, it'll depend on what public health calls for at that time. If the plans around public health are based on people's first dose, so they're based on a certain percentage of the population having their first dose of vaccines. So if a student was to have their first dose, they would probably be able to participate as normal in whatever activities there are until they get their second dose. But we would definitely encourage them to get their second dose as soon as possible.
Thank you very much. A great question has come in that I'm going to turn to Janet Mee, our interim senior director, student engagement. Hi, Janet. Lots of interest about Jumpstart, and could you give us an idea what Jumpstart and Imagine might look like for first-year students?
Good morning, everyone. I would be pleased to do so. So UBC will be offering a full orientation program for Jumpstart and for Imagine. Each of the programs will be offered in a combination of hybrid and online. All of the large-scale gatherings, such as Jumpstart, though, the Jumpstart orientation or opening ceremony, the Imagine Pep Rally and the Imagine main event will remain virtual. And any final decisions regarding the orientation events will be made in sort of mid to late July. So a few details for Jumpstart, for students living in residence, and for those who will be commuting to campus, Jumpstart will be hybrid. That means it'll be 3 days in person, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and 2 days online, Tuesday and Thursday. Recognizing that some students will not be able to join their classmates on campus, the orientation activities for Jumpstart will also offer a fully virtual stream. I will say for both Jumpstart and orientation that the registration is open and that the overwhelming registration is for in-person. So the virtual offerings will be smaller, but they will be fulsome. The majority of the in-person sessions will be in groups of 30 to 50 for your learning communities. There'll be some larger gatherings for some faculty sessions, and the group sizes for in-person social events will be determined by the PHO orders at the time. For Imagine, students will be grouped by their faculty as usual, so it will look very similar to a typical Imagine event. There will be a meetup, a meet the dean, OPROF, and the campus experience. The portion of in-person versus virtual will vary by faculty and by program. For example, some faculties will live stream their meet the dean session, while others will offer a fully live session. For sessions that are live, those groups will also attend the pep rally in a lecture hall and watch it sort of party style, while others will be watching from anywhere on campus or at home. Again, the main event, which is the opportunity to learn about campus activities and opportunities to get involved on campus, will be virtual and will be scheduled for before and after the in-person experiences, so students can attend from anywhere. We'll be running 2 different schedules, and students will be assigned to one of them depending on their faculty or group. The last thing I might just share is that we recognize that many of our second year students will be joining us on campus for the first time this fall. So we'll be offering a special session for second year students and for transfer students. The event will take place on Monday, September 6th, and it'll start at 1 p.m. Students will be gathered in small interdisciplinary interest-based groups and will have a student leader joining them. And they'll also have an opportunity to connect with each other at the meetup, and will become more familiar with the campus and the traditional ancestral and unceded Musqueam land that UBC exists on through a campus experience, which will be a walk around campus with certain elements of the campus highlighted. After the programming, there will be optional additional programming that you can check out and from campus partners like the AMS, the Student Alumni Council, and faculties and schools. Registration for all of the events are open. And there's lots of information online, so I encourage you to check it out.
Thank you very much, Janet. Very informative as always. We've got some great questions coming in with respect to student clubs, and I'd be grateful if I could turn the microphone over to Cole Evans, our AMS president, and Kamani Karanju, the GSS president. Cole and Kamani, the questions are, will clubs and student organizations be able to operate in person and hold in-person events this year?
Yeah, thanks, David. So, we've been hearing this question a lot. I'm very excited to say that, we do anticipate that with what public health guidance is currently looking like, that clubs and student groups should be able to operate mostly normally heading into September for the most part. Again, something that we're stressing to all of our student groups from the AMS is ensuring that we are very strictly following public health guidance. So sort of like Norjean had mentioned earlier, that we're kind of predicting the future a little bit, and it's a bit of looking into a crystal ball. But currently, if we do end up in phase 4 of the BC Restart Plan at September 7th, we do anticipate that most clubs should be able to see some degree of normalcy heading into the school year.
Yeah, thank you, Cole, for that. I think if I may want to add on that as well, I think the GSS should be able, the GSS should be able to do the same. Although this will be like, it's on outdoor will be 100%, but the indoor might be somehow restricted. This is because of some of the renovations that may be going on in the GSS center, that is a Tiacona house, and that might see some of the restriction going in because of the building and repairing construction measure. So other than that, everything else should be able to run as normal. And of course, we'll keep an eye on what the provincial health officers are telling us to do and exactly do that. Thank you so much, David, too.
Yeah, thank you very much for those great answers, Cole and Kamani. I'm going to turn over to Andrew Parr now. Andrew is our Associate Vice President, Student Housing and Community Services. And Andrew, we've got a number of questions about student residence and so on. Wonder if you could explain to our participants today how student residence will be affected over the coming year.
Andrew, you're still on mute if you're talking. Andrew may not have arrived yet.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Carey. I thought I saw, maybe he has an internet issue, but we have no shortage of great questions. So I was going to turn to Pam Ratner, my good colleague in the Provost's office. If using your crystal ball, Pam, could you give the group today a sense of what kind of capacity you think the university might be in terms of its density? Are we thinking about, normally we might have around 60,000 people or so during winter terms 1 and 2. Where do you sort of see the density for the classroom, for the campus this year?
Thanks, Dave. I know that that's a question that many are interested in, and I wish I had a crystal ball. I don't. We haven't finished registration for courses, and that will be the most important indicator of how many students will be on campus on a given day. We're anticipating, from what Dr. Bates said, that perhaps 10% of you will be studying online from time to time. And so we should have, perhaps 40,000 here on campus. And for faculty and staff, again, we've learned a lot through this process, and I think UBC is changing its approach to employment generally and creating opportunities for people who have proven that they can work very productively remotely to continue to do so over time. And so that is going to change, I think, the density on campus, but to the extent possible in the first few months, we don't know yet. I'm wondering if the question is related to transportation and parking, and if so, if those questions are arising, Dave, if others might answer those questions in respect to this.
Yeah, it very well could be, Pam, and again, that's a question we can ask Andrew Parr when he's able to reconnect. Another question that is popping up quite popularly is the sorry, it's just skipped my screen here. And maybe this is a question for you, Dr. Bates. If students stay home because they have symptoms or they have been exposed to COVID in the classroom, will professors post notes or recordings, or will we need to rely on students to provide notes and other explanatory support?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think it will vary by course. I would certainly think that all professors would provide notes and learning materials like that. As to recordings, as I said in my comments, that may happen. It may be possible to get the professor's permission for other students to make recordings if professor doesn't feel comfortable doing that. So what I would say is in our conversations with faculty, we're saying, make a plan for this, put it in the course syllabus, communicate with students at the start of the course. So I think it will be a variety of different approaches. But I can say that faculty understand some of the challenges that students will find themselves in as we enter the fall semester. And they're committed to finding ways for students to be able to continue their learning.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bates, for that great answer. One of the most, in terms of the live questions that are coming in, one of the most popular questions has to do with tuition. And with great respect, I'm going to turn it over to our Provost and Vice President Academic, Dr. Andrew Zeri, to respond to the question, which is, why was there a rise in annual tuition fees this year, even after one considers the economic impact on family income globally?
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate the question. It's an important one. So UBC's Board of Governors considered the question about tuition in this past April meeting. I think it's fair to say they recognized the university has spent a lot of extra funding on student support, things like emergency student bursaries, additional expenditure for IT infrastructure to enable remote teaching, extra teaching assistant support, and in many other ways. Also, I think the board recognized that the university has lost some important sources of revenue. Now, the university is responsible for a balanced budget to the provincial government, although the government has been a little bit flexible in the short term for us, but in the long run, we are responsible for a balanced budget. So for these reasons, the board made the decision to impose a modest tuition increase in April.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zeri. Dr. Bates, I'm going to put you back on the spot. You're very popular as always. Back to kind of online courses and so on. Could you please give us a sense about whether more online courses could be offered, and particularly for those folks that are in second year and worried that online sections will fill up quickly?
Yeah, so the advising offices will be monitoring the registration in online courses. As I said, many of them are keeping some seats back to make sure that those students who really need access to those online courses for the reasons that we talked about that might prevent them from coming to campus in September really can be accommodated within those online sections. There is the possibility that if there's huge demand for those online sections, then I'm thinking here of larger multi-section courses. It may be possible to swap an in-person section to an online section, but this is a process that we're going to have to work through as the registration period unfolds, and through discussion with the advising officers and the faculty members teaching those courses. But we're certainly aware of the issue.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bates. I see that Andrew Parr has now been able to reconnect with us, so it gives me great pleasure to ask the next question to Andrew Parr. Andrew, as I mentioned earlier, is our Associate Vice President, Student Housing and Community Services. Thanks, Andrew, for making the time today. A couple of questions. Could you please give our students today a sense of how student residence life will be affected over the coming year? And I do have a follow-up, but if you could respond to that first, that would be great.
Yes, hello everybody. I apologize. I hope you can hear me now. I'm having some technical difficulties, but first of all, welcome to this session. And again, I apologize for being late. What I can tell you about student residence is actually, there's some good news and there's some challenging news. The good news is that we are going to be fully operational. So all of our 12,800 beds are available for students to reside in. Including a new facility that's actually opening in the next couple of weeks, and we'll be welcoming students for September as well. So that's great news, and we're working very closely with the health authorities, with other divisions of UBC to ensure that we are providing not only a welcoming and community building environment, but also a safe environment for all students. The less than good news is that demand for student housing is very high. Very similar to pre-COVID levels, which means that we have significantly more demand than we have supply for. So for any student that is listening to this call right now that has received confirmation from us that they have access and an offer for housing, that's great. Others that have not, we are at this point basically full. We are working through wait lists, and we do hope to open up more spaces for students as we move through the summer and we understand our yield and that kind of thing. So that's what I can say about sort of access. In terms of the environment, we're working really closely with Jumpstart for first year students and building plans to support other students, and particularly second year students who will be arriving on campus for the first time, and really working towards within the restrictions of COVID protocols, developing a really strong, robust community for students that live in residence.
That's great. Thank you very much, Andrew. Kind of a follow-up with respect to housing and capacity and so on is about quarantine options. And I wonder if you could tell our students joining us today if UBC will be offering on-campus quarantine options for international travelers.
Yes, thanks, David. We have a limited number of spaces available, and that's limited because the spaces that we're using are spaces that would otherwise be occupied by ongoing student residents. So we're trying to find a balance between maximizing that opportunity while also providing self-isolation spaces for those that need it upon arrival, or in the event that they're contact traced or actually contract the virus. There's a lot of moving parts in this question because the federal government is changing regulations, sort of as we speak. There was a change in regulations last week, and we anticipate there'll be other changes in regulation as the summer progresses. We don't know for sure, but we anticipate that. So we've built a plan to provide as much service as possible, and we have also reached out on campus, and those are at very sort of favorable rates, and there's a subsidy available as well. And that can all be found on our website, which can be posted here, or if you just Google UBC self-isolation, it'll take you to the page with all that detail. As well, we've reached out to a number of hotels to solidify room blocks at the best sort of rates possible, to allow for students to be able to self-isolate off campus and receive the best rates possible from off campus. And that's available on that same website.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I'd like to turn the next question, if I may, over to Dr. Porter. Dr. Porter, a question has come in about remote dissertations and so on. So a couple of questions on that front. I'll ask them consecutively. The first is, can a graduate student still defend their dissertation remotely? And the second question, not really totally related though, will students be able to travel internationally to conduct their research?
I think I answered those. So yes, we are still anticipating doing online dissertation defenses. And with respect to travel, there are many layers of approvals. It depends where you're going and what you're doing. And you might need authorization by the Student Safety Abroad. You might need authorization by your department head and faculty, and you might need authorization by the ethics board. So it depends, and I am encouraging people to talk to their faculty advisor, their supervisor.
Thank you, Dr. Porter. Question for Norjean, possibly, or Dr. Ratner. Will UBC provide students with COVID antibody testing?
What we are planning is to provide rapid testing to determine if you have the virus, that is, you have an infection. But we won't be testing for seroprevalence of antibodies. I'm not sure why that's a question, so I'm not sure if it's, it would be helpful to understand what motivates the question. What we'd be most interested in would be identifying possible cases rather than the extent to which people are immune. We've learned, and there's another paper just, or a study from Montreal that was just announced in the paper this morning that you might be interested in, that shows that people who are vaccinated are very unlikely to be infected. And if they are, they typically have very mild cases of COVID-19. Hence why we're encouraging people to be vaccinated. And with that, we would assume that you have good immunity.
Thanks, Dr. Ratner. Another question about vaccines, and I'll direct this one to Norjean, if I may. Does being vaccinated or not, or vaccinated with vaccines that are not approved in Canada, put students at any disadvantage with respect to accessing any services on campus?
There may be some requirements to have a vaccine here, depending on what you've been vaccinated with. Those are still regulations that are being looked at. But there are, at this point, no vaccines that are considered poor. There's I guess what I'm trying to say is the evidence is still out about what's going to happen for those people who are being vaccinated with something that hasn't been sort of considered an approved vaccine here. But if we look to the guidelines for September, there shouldn't be any restrictions for those students who've been not vaccinated or vaccinated with other vaccines if we are able to follow the restart plan as it's showing. Because the restart plan is not dependent on 100% of the population being vaccinated, but it is dependent on a very significant proportion of the population being vaccinated.
Thank you very much, Norjean. I have a follow-up, if I may, and it's related to testing. And so we do have a testing capability on campus. How will UBC monitor people that are asymptomatic, and what do you think the opportunities are with respect to more aggressive testing on campus?
Well, if you think about a communicable disease, we don't actively monitor people. We expect them to follow very common sense rules of staying home if they're sick, not exposing others, of course, getting the vaccine, as we've said time and time again today. And if somebody did end up being sick and was positive for COVID, it would follow the normal communicable disease trajectory, where that person, there may be contact tracing where that person is contacted to find out where they've been and who they could have possibly exposed. And those people will be notified and asked to be tested themselves. But again, it really depends on how prevalent COVID is in our population to what our response would be when somebody had an illness. So as I mentioned in the presentation, what public health does is they adjust their response according to the severity of the disease. So if COVID is very minimal in our population, then we're not going to be putting necessarily contact tracing in place, but we are going to be putting general guidelines for safety in place. We know that people who are vaccinated and others have less of a severity in their symptoms when enough of the population is vaccinated. So there's all sorts of shift that will happen over time. Does that answer the question, David, or do I need to explain a bit more?
No, I think that's a fantastic answer, Norjean. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn back to Andrew Parr, and the question here, Andrew, is again about housing, obviously, and second-year students. And so, do second-year students also get priority in student housing due to being unable to participate in housing in the first year?
Thanks, David. We do have a first-year guarantee, as many students are aware, because of our capacity and our inventory. We weren't able to actually offer a sort of a clean second year guarantee, but recognizing that second years are going to be first time on campus and experiencing even Vancouver for the first time and the campus experience for the first time, we have set aside significantly more spaces in residence for second year students, about double the number. So we'll be in the we're hoping around 1,500 or so second year students versus around 700 or so typically in a typical year, giving that opportunity to second year students. Also working very closely with other areas of the Vice President Students portfolio around orientations and onboarding opportunities for second year students to ensure that they are connected and engaged with UBC, more so than we typically would for second year students who've already had 1 year on campus. So I guess the short answer is it's good news in that we've expanded the availability for second year residents. Unfortunately, we weren't able to offer a full, clean second year guarantee because of our capacity issues.
Thank you very much, Andrew. If I may, I'm going to turn the final question directed, I should say, to Dr. Zeri. And the question, Dr. Zeri, is the following. With the threat of the more contagious Delta variant, for which vaccines are possibly less effective, how will UBC adapt? And what is plan B should the variant take off in some way or another?
Thanks for the question. Of course, the pandemic has been evolving, changing in character now for 16 months or more. And we've entered a number of different phases where there are different concerns about different aspects of the pandemic, and we need different responses. If things change in the future in an adverse way, we'll be looking to our Ministry of Advanced Education and Skills Training, which is informed by the science of public health advisors. And they will be providing us with advice about how we should pivot. That might mean a number of things. It might mean changes in the way we handle masks or vaccines or other aspects of the way we run the university. But we will be very careful to keep up with the latest science and act accordingly.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zeri. And thank you to all the students who pre-submitted questions and submitted questions today. I'd like to turn now to Dr. Carey to provide closing comments on today's session. Dr. Carey?
Thank you, Dave. I'd like to thank everyone who played an instrumental role in facilitating today's conversation. Thanks for all of your hard work behind the scenes. And to all of our students who are attending today, I want to emphasize some of the key messages we heard today. There's still a lot to discover about what needs to happen in the months to come. So please know that your university has been working really hard to try to answer as many questions as possible, but we will learn more as we arrive closer to September. And we hope to provide an additional update perhaps in August, where we can come together again and have a similar conversation with updated information. We are committed to making a smooth transition back to campus. We know there are a lot of things that seem uncertain right now, but please let us know if you have individual questions that we can respond to. Your academic advisors, your enrollment services advisors, accessibility services, student healthcare services. We're all here to address your collective needs as well as some of your individual needs. So don't hesitate to contact any of us via email or through our website to learn more about what's available for all of our students. Again, I'd like to say a double thank you for all of your time and attention, and look forward to seeing you in September. Have a great rest of your day, everyone, and thank you for joining us.